Oh.
I use OBS to record.
Yeah.
I know Gavin doesn't like it, but I do. I've never had a bad experience with it yet.
It's always freaked out on me.
Yeah. I know I'm a Windows machine that started to wig out on me.
Yeah, I use, I started with QuickTime, and
Yeah.
I changed away from QuickTime to, I use a screen recording tool called Monosnap,
Mm-hmm.
because the screenshot tool on the Macs always kind of sucked. Yeah. But in Mojave, it's actually pretty good, because they've stolen all the features, so you can, you can draw on your screen captures now, you do a screen capture and you can, mark it up.
Oh.
So I like adding arrows and boxes,
Yes.
look here's the thing. But Monosnap also has a video recording.
Mm.
So I turn that on, and I set it for 15 frames a second.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take out almost any of the CPU.
Okay.
Where QuickTime just is going to record at 60 frames a
Oh
second.
yeah, QuickTime is super high def. You need to know everything. It's
Yeah.
I actually don't.
Yeah.
My eyes are only so good.
Are you using OBS to stream? Or are you using
No.
OBS to record?
just to record. I've done streaming before.
Yeah. Maybe that's my challenge, because I've always used it to stream, never to just record.
Mm-hmm.
I've always used it as a streaming thing, and that's where it's...
Yeah, that's where you have to fiddle with the settings and get it to work.
Or I find out that halfway through it stopped streaming, and it didn't tell me.
Yeah.
So maybe I've never tried it as a recording, so maybe I should try that.
I know I'm only using a tenth of its power, but I only want it to record,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about Angular.
Are you recording now?
I'm recording.
Okay, cool.
I recorded that entire delightful conversation.
Nice.
Yeah. So whenever they go back and listen to it, they can have our opinions on the recording software. In case you need something to fall asleep to tonight.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about AngularJS today. I kind of want to set the stage with what is AngularJS and kind of what exactly it is, kind of chat about it. Then we're going to do a little using the knowledge of and concepts that we know in React is how can we learn a new framework. Because there's a chance that when you get out of here, on your first job, you won't be doing React. You might be doing Angular, AngularJS,
or the new framework that was invented today.
Yeah, or whatever new framework is coming out today. You never know. So how can we take our existing knowledge of front-end development and how can we apply that to a new language, new framework? So AngularJS was built by, actually, was it Google who built it originally?
I don't remember.
I actually don't remember. Wow. But I know it's inherited by Google and Microsoft.
Yes.
That kind of the non-Facebook people. But it was a popular front-end framework a couple years ago, and it really kind of shook up the front-end frameworks of kind of what was going on and what a front-end framework could do. It's very based in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So unlike in React, where we have something called JSX, you have your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all kind of together in one place. This is a very opposite approach, where you have your template, which is only HTML. You have your JavaScript, which is only JavaScript. You have your CSS in a completely different place as well. So it's much more separation of concerns. And it's much more an MVC architecture, where one thing only has one responsibility. MVC is a phrase you're going to hear more and more next week. Stands for Model View Controller. And pretty much what it means is that you have something that just worries about your data, and that's it, and how to store the data. That's your model. You have your view, which is what's the presentation look like, and only cares about how to display to the users. Then you have your controller that acts kind of like a middleman of taking stuff from the view and going to the database, and going from the database and going back to the view. And actually, AngularJS iterated on that and created something called the Model View model, which we're not going to get into the technical details of that because we don't care about it. But it is kind of more of a separation of concerns than React is, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Would you say that Angular is more opinionated than React?
Very much so. React is a library, right? It's a very thin presentation layer on top of JavaScript. You're still writing a lot of JavaScript when you're writing React. Angular is very opinionated. It's often said when you're writing AngularJS, you're actually not writing JavaScript, you're writing Angular. For loops are kind of not so much in your face. There's that logic is still there, but you're really writing in directives and controllers, not so much JavaScript object and functions.
So would you say, Mark, that in React, they kind of give you small tools and let you decide how to use them. Where in Angular, they kind of tell you this is the one way to do it.
Yep. So like state management, routing, actual like rendering, any other libraries that we plug in, React really doesn't care. Like, yeah, we've done React. We've done React Router. There's something called Redux out there for a state management.
We talked about MobX for one day.
Yeah.
But in React land, React Router actually doesn't have anything to do with React. The
Right.
React team didn't make React Router. Somebody else did.
Mhm.
It's the most popular router. But it's not the only router.
Yeah.
React, the core of them, they don't care which router you use or which state management you use because that's not their concern. For something like Angular, it seems they want to provide you everything and the kitchen sink all in
Very
one
much.
world, and they control the horizontal and the vertical, and you just do it the way Angular wants you to do it, and everything will be happy.
Very much so. Like the routers built into the framework, state management, their equivalent of that is built into the framework. We're going to see today that even like something like Axios, a wrapper over fetch, isn't needed because Angular has their own wrapper over fetch that they use. So it's very much like, hey, you're doing Angular, you're doing Angular.
Do you think that's why Angular seems to be popular in the Microsoft community because it kind of aligns with the like .NET provides you everything and kind of this is the way we do it, and then you want to have the same style of development on the front end?
It's very much so like I don't have to make those choices. Like Angular has made those choices. They're like, hey, this is how we're going to do routing. This is how we're going to do AJAX calls. This is how we're going to do rendering. This is how we're going to do everything. I don't need to make that call. So as a developer who's just like, I want to build stuff and not think about the technology behind it, it's really good for that. Versus in React or something that's very unopinionated and much more open, I have to go, oh, I need a library that does routing. Which one's the best one out there? Which one do I want to hitch my horse to? So it gets me kind of more fine-tuned control and give me more power as a developer to actually choose the tech stack and choose the tools and tool chain that best fits my need. But now I need to spend extra time properly evaluating choices and coming up with the plans in case those fail and kind of how we can interop. It's like building with Lego blocks versus carving out of wood. Like carving out of wood, I know exactly what I'm going to, it's not going to be made out of wood, it's going to be perfectly crafted to what I have to do versus, oh, I'm going to put a whole bunch of Lego blocks together.
That's interesting because it's kind of the same thing when we look tomorrow at Rails. Right? The Rails framework for Ruby has that same opinionated feel where they've decided ahead of time, we're going to provide you everything out of the box you need. You don't have to make any decisions about what parts and pieces to put into your app. It's here's everything out of the box.
Yeah, and that's where the distinction between a framework and a library is that a framework kind of does everything for you, while a library is just like, here, I'm going to do this one thing, rendering stuff to the page. I'm going to do that one thing. I'm going to do it very, very well, and that's it. You can plug me in wherever you want.
Library does that?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is a library is like a very small scalpel of a tool. It does one thing really well, but it doesn't do everything. Frameworks ideas are they're going to do many, many things mostly well.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying, John, is like, why doesn't React have all of these things? It's not actually React's place to do the importing of images, right? That importing of images is actually not a React thing. That's a core JavaScript thing.
Yeah.
Right. So React's like, we're just going to focus on this. We're not going to help you with importing a bunch of images. That's somebody else's library's deal to do that. If you want to use that along with React, cool. But React's going to focus just on what they're good at and just what they're doing. And they'll let you go out and find other tools to bring in to do those things. Where we may find when we look at Angular, they made a decision as they think the best way to import a directory of 52 card images is using this particular part of Angular. Kind of the difference between a library and a framework.
Just seems harder in React to do that versus like, if you just go in JavaScript and reference the image.
Yeah, well, that is true and not true because what will happen to you in plain JavaScript are issues that you have not experienced yet as a developer on larger projects that are deployed into production certain ways. So you think it's easier because you haven't felt the pain that easy decision will cause you later on. But even still, React is not going to help you with any of that, right? JavaScript itself gives you a tool to doing that, which is the import tool that solves some of these technical problems in production deployment. but React is not going to help you overcome the issues that brings in, right? So every technical thing you bring in it solves some things and introduces some new challenges. React is saying, we're going to focus just on that rendering and just on state management.
Yep.
That's all we're going to do. If you want routing, bring in the library. If you want like resource management, so like I want to auto import a whole directory of things, there are tools that can do that. We're not going to build that into React, where Angular might build all of that in.
So then the question becomes, what type of websites is Angular going to be better at compared to React?
I don't think it's
Yeah.
which kind of websites. It's what kind of developer. What's the philosophy of your team, right? So imagine you're going to build. You're going to sit down and you're in a startup and you're like, we're going to build the best Yelp killer we can find, right? That's what we're going to build. React is good for that. Angular is good for that. Ember is good for that. Backbone is good for that. All these things are good for it. The question is, what is your development team style?
Yep.
Do you want to be the kind of team where you're gonna go out and get a whole bunch of sharp tools that all do what they do really well, but in a small silo, and you're going to stitch them together yourself? We want the best state management. We want the best rendering engine. We feel that's React. We want the best router. That's React Router. We want the best asset manager. We think that's Webpack. We think, right, and you're going to stitch together all these tools, or are you the kind of team that's like, nope, I just want to buy, air quotes, buy one tool like Angular that gives us all that stuff out of the box. Now, it may not be the best rendering, it may not be the best image management, it may not be the best, but it's going to get us 80% of what we want across the entire suite of things that we want to be able to do. And whatever the downside of that, we'll just live with those things, right? But we're gonna let it make all the decisions. They have gone off and decided what they want to provide us out of that box. We are good, right? It's like, do you want to buy a prefab home, or do you want to design your own? With React, you're deciding where does the door go, where does the window go, what kind of roof we're going to put on it, right? But you're going to get exactly what you want. With something like Angular, you're going to get a home that's a livable home. It works. It does what it wants, but like the kitchen's going to be where the kitchen is, and the faucet's going to be where the faucet's going to work. And if you're okay with that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And now you can just move right in. You don't have to wait for the house to be designed. It just gets dropped down on your lot, and you move in. That's the kind of thing where you decide based on what kind of team you're working on that you want to do.
Yeah, it's just to kind of echo. It's all about like what dev culture do you have there? Do you have a lot of people that want to be able to like plug and play or like interchange things really easily and kind of be more experimental, or do you want to be like, this is what we're doing, this is it? Some people like different things. I've worked on dev teams with both, and they've both been successful and fun.
Yeah, and you also have to be the kind of team that's like, we're going to go with Angular, and Angular's going to apply constraints, and it's going to imply decisions. And when we get to them, we have to be okay with their decision. What you're going to find in frameworks, and this is true in Rails, and see if Mark believes this is true in Angular, because I honestly don't know, there is the Rails way, right? There's the frameworks way. And if your team is the kind of team that like bucks at those constraints and fights them, what's going to happen is the framework's going to fight back and tell you, no, please don't do that because we want you to stay within the line. So you have to be okay coloring within the lines. As soon as you color outside the lines, things get bad pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's really like you need to like know it's that framework, whatever, whether it's Rails, ASP.NET, Angular, stuff like that, whatever framework you choose, that's almost like another member of your dev team. Like you have to work with that and not against it. If I'm always trying to write stuff that goes against the framework, opening up the framework, modifying what's going on, like maybe we should choose a different framework. Maybe we need to go something more minimalistic like React instead of something more kitchen sinky like Angular.
It's more a philosophy thing than it is a technical thing.
Oh yeah,
often.
yeah, and that goes just kind of that goes with a lot of like, oh, is X better than Y for this website? A lot of the times, technically nowadays, like 95% of languages do the exact same thing, pretty much. It's going to come down to like, what's your culture like? What's the philosophy? What are you actually building? Not what are you building it with? So, Angular. Here we are, roundabout kind of way. So whenever I approach a new language, I always be like, okay, what kind of create React app do we have? Because that's really what we learned on day one, right? Day one of the course, we learned about app. You know, like let's get like kind of an engine going, a scaffold going. React, learn about create React. In AngularJS, before we get into this, Angular is actually two worlds that are living in one. There's Angular and there's AngularJS. AngularJS is what we're going to be exploring today. It's version 1.x. I think it's on 1.7 as of yesterday. But pretty much what happens is that the Angular team, whenever they were working on version 1 and working on version 2, said, you know what, version 1's philosophy and ideas don't work anymore or aren't as popular as they should be. And this comes with a lot of pitfalls. So we're going to do a complete rewrite and call it Angular. At the time it was Angular 2. And now this new Angular is more like React. Very component-based. I believe it has one-way data binding like React has. So it's an entirely different way of thinking. But AngularJS, this 1.x, is still very popular. So, but this is almost like we're stuck in time, circa 2014-ish. Yeah, 2014, 15.
I think
But it's still iterated since then, so it is still growing and still popular. So there's two different flavors of Angular and AngularJS.
That's the challenge when you tie yourself to a framework,
Mm-hmm.
and then those framework people decide we're going to do the big rewrite.
Mm-hmm.
Now your team's like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We've invested all this time in AngularJS. Our entire stack's based on it, and our entire team knows on it. There's a hesitancy to throw all it away and switch to the new thing. So you'll find that when projects like this do the big rewrite or a massive shift between versions, there's always this huge lag time where the old version is still very popular.
Yeah.
It happened to Python between Python 2 and Python 3.
Yep.
And Python 3 now, like 8 years later, is still not the dominant Python because they did such a big shift that developers are wary to move over.
Yep. .NET is going through the same thing with .NET Framework and .NET Core. .NET Core is the newest, latest, greatest thing. And it came out 2 years ago. It's only now starting to get major market adoption. So it's like this, major rewrite. Now we have two different versions flying out there.
One will eventually, the old one will eventually die off, but there's a huge number of years of trailing support for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And where this was going was that coming back to that, whenever AngularJS was popular, command line templatings, at least in the JavaScript world, weren't that popular, and they were actually centerized around certain tools. So you know how we talk about tools doing one thing very well? Well, instead of AngularJS creating their own templating engine, they use something called Yeoman as their templating engine. Yeoman is a very popular templating command line tool that is used in a variety of different languages. I don't know if
AppApp actually uses it.
AppApp uses it under the hood. So it's popular. It's not so popular nowadays. I believe it's kind of like went by the wayside. But Angular still uses that as kind of like their main templating engine.
And what he means is that first thing that generates your base code. So you know when you do AppApp, you get an index.
Yep.
So you get a screen CSS and an index HTML, and it says the name of your app is in the README and it's in the code. That's that templating. Right? It's the bootstrap of your new application that auto-generates some code to get you started.
So I'm going to use it just by typing Yo. I've installed a whole bunch of stuff. Yo, and it is Yo Angular, and then what I want to call it. So Yo Angular Hello World.
So if somebody wanted to follow along with a npm install.
Oh, so if you want to follow along, let me bring up the website. And let me blast this out to cohort 11. Yep, that's what I meant to say.
Will we continue working in Unit 2 or should we create Unit 3?
This is still Unit 2. So if you want to follow along, you're going to need to install these couple of things.
And don't forget to do it with the -g, npm install -g.
So just kind of look at what we're installing here. We're installing Grit CLI, Bower Yo, a Karma generator, and an Angular generator.
Can we do that from anywhere?
Yes.
Globally?
Yes.
Yep. As long as you have that -g, it's from anywhere. So let's kind of break that down real fast. Grunt is going to be what we're going to be using to run our website. It is a task manager in JavaScript. So you know how we have like Yarn and NPM and stuff like that? That's going to kind of replace that. We'll kind of dig more into that in a little bit. Bower, I should forget what Bower is. Wow. That's a
But
great
Bower is another like an asset manager, kind of like.
That's exactly what it is. It was kind of like the precursor to Webpack
Webpack.
almost.
Yeah.
Yo,
Yeah, so Bower is the thing that's going to manage all of our CSS and our JavaScript, so that if we use any new features of JavaScript, it will support it. And when we go to like Surge, deploy it, it will manage all of that process of building up the HTML, so we can send it to something like Surge.
Yo is the actual templating engine. Generator Karma is something we need to actually create it, and also the generator for Angular as well. This is saying, hey, install the generator, install my asset manager, install my task runner, and then actually install the templates that I'm going to be using. All in one fell swoop. So, after you have done that, head into a directory where you want to make something. This directory is currently empty, and it's in the lecture notes. So it's going to be Yo Angular, and because it's my very first one, I'm going to create a Hello World project just to kind of experiment to see what's going on there. So what it's going to do, it's going to run the templating engine,
It's pretty.
ask you a couple of questions as you stare at the nice little yeoman. Do I want to use gulp? No. Gulp and grunt, pretty much the same thing, just different tools that do the same function. Generally, no. I don't want to use Sass. I'll include Bootstrap. And then it's a whole bunch of, so these are a whole bunch of stuff that's included by default. You have a question?
Yo Angular what?
Yo Angular, then the name of the project.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah.
You include all those things we need for installation on your notes for today?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So this is kind of like the unopinionated thing, kind of like rearing its head. It's saying here's a whole bunch of stuff that you're probably going to need for a real site that I'm making choices for you. So it's like there's cookie management, there's routing, there's how do we sanitize our information that's going around. There's a lot of stuff going on here that we may or may not need. For this, I'm actually going to say no to a lot of these. Everything except for route. That's the only thing that I'm going to include in this. Route is the routing, so we're going to make a couple different pages.
How do you say no to them?
What?
How do you say no to those?
Space.
The arrow key and
Yeah.
the space.
Yeah, the arrow key selects it, and then space will check it or not.
So we pick route.
Yep, that's the only one that should be selected. Then it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff for you. And this is Bower installing it. You know, it's actually also running npm install for a couple packages. It's doing a lot of work here for you.
Look at all the warnings.
Yeah, a lot of deprecated warnings. Like I said, it was kind of stuck in circa 2015. So what's up?
Mine's asking if I want to overwrite my package JSON.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Because it made the package JSON and now it wants to change it as it goes.
We should look at updating AppApp. Potentially do an Angular.js project.
I would like to get the big three in there.
Yeah.
Maybe even both flavors of Angular, Vue
Yeah.
and React.
I've changed AppApp a little bit to make that a little bit easier. If you look at the latest version,
Oh,
it should be
okay.
easier to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because I put React back in.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay.
So we could look at doing that to make it a little bit easier for bootstrapping.
Mm-hmm. Did you fix the vulnerabilities yet?
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, it's clean.
Okay.
If you AppApp a React project, it's its clean vulnerabilities.
Nice. So yeah, overwrite package JSON again. That's awesome. I need to install that app.
Yeah,
again.
it's not deployed. It's to install it from GitHub
Oh,
until
okay.
Jason pushes it to npm.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And yes, you can npm install. You can even give it the GitHub username /project, and it will install directly from GitHub.
Wow,
Very nice.
that is fancy. Is that an NPM thing or?
Look how much stuff like Angular is already bringing in.
Yeah.
Right, it's bringing in lots of stuff, and that's the idea of a framework's going to bring in a lot of code behind what it's doing.
Yeah. And we'll kind of look at the package JSON. I mean, we've looked at the package JSON before, right? Like we know, like that's what the dependencies are.
Yeah, we haven't really peeked into package JSON yet, so
Okay.
this is a good day to do that.
I actually might make a React app just to kind of like comparison.
Well, they should have some because they've got some package JSONs from the React apps they've made,
Oh, okay.
and they're in the repo.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so here's everything that it made for us. I went from an empty directory to a directory with a lot of stuff in it. A grunt file, folder called app, something called Bower components, a folder called tests of node modules. There's a lot of stuff going on here comparatively to a React app. Fortunately, we don't care about a lot of it, but it's kind of good to look at it. So let's open this up. We do live share here, huh?
Yes,
Whew.
and there's a toggle you can turn on to get more than 5 if you
Okay.
haven't found it already.
I don't think I have. Yes.
If you go into your preferences and search for live or share, there's you can turn on like an experimental feature.
Down.
Extensions, views for live. Scroll down.
Ah,
Yes, guest limit increases the limit from 5 to 30.
awesome.
Yes,
Cool.
that's a lifesaver.
Yeah. Let me start my session here.
So I think you all like that, being able to like bring up the live share and see this code that's being typed. You don't have to like type along. You can kind of copy and paste. That's worked really well.
All right, yes, we have
A ton of stuff.
a ton of stuff. So this is the default basic Angular JS app. Just to kind of see like our package JSON. We have a lot of stuff here. Our dev dependencies you see is huge.
So this package JSON file, when we do something like yarn add, what it's doing is it's adding to this package.json file that tells the tooling what are all of the other libraries code that our app needs, right? So this is where like Axios would appear. It's where React Router would appear. It's the file that npm or yarn use to determine what are all the dependencies of this code. So he's bringing up the React Blackjack we just did.
Yep.
And look at the dev dependencies here, too. Look at the dependencies, and it's all the things you'd expect. We're using Axios, we're using a mutability helper, React, React DOM, and React scripts. And this file says not only what dependencies we need for development, but what dependencies are needed for the actual app we're building. And so dev dependencies are things that we as developers use. These are packages we need to make our development world work. These are the dependencies of the actual app. And it also says what version of that code are we using.
Is there, I can't change into the directory. I made it in Unit 2, but it's not here. Is that a normal thing?
Do an LS?
Yeah.
Same actually. I was kinda,
You're in that problem too?
yeah. I have like bower.json now, Bower components, but I don't have the hello world that I tried to make it.
You
are not in
your...
Yeah,
it made it inside
that
Not anymore.
So that folder is now your Angular project.
Which one?
That folder. Your Unit 2 folder.
Oh, so I mean,
Okay.
mine said,
Yeah.
So I think
So there's no hello world, even though I named it.
So run a cat on type cat.
Okay.
Package JSON. Package.json. So it's roll up. So there's your hello world.
Okay.
So that Yo generator made it in that directory. It didn't make a new directory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they need to make the directory first.
Yes.
So mine
Okay.
is probably week
So
7 then?
Yeah.
How do I?
So just delete those files
Okay.
and make a new directory and run that command.
So just gonna
I'm assuming? I thought I was
Yep.
putting it into week 7.
No, it's put in the week 7 folder. It's not even week 7 folder. It's an Angular app.
Cool. So
Yeah.
how do I reverse this?
So delete those folders.
I'll just
I think getting that from the long, so I'm not sure that-
because globally wouldn't then just be installed
Oh,
already?
yeah, you should start that. I would, it's up to you, it's your computer, but, it's a good option.
I didn't get all the stuff to install at the beginning.
So this-
I would definitely install it here.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna follow along.
My hard work is gone.
Now and 8:30 tonight.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm in unit 2 now. What do I do now?
Make a folder.
Make a new
Oh, boy.
folder.
Can we go through this all
Can we
again now?
go through this so we can all be on the same page?
Yeah, so what's happening is that this command that we ran doesn't make a new folder. It makes the project in the current directory. So if you ran this in the Unit 2 folder, expecting it to make a new directory, but it didn't. So to fix this, what you have to do, you have to delete the files. Your favorite way, either RM, a whole bunch of stuff, or go through Finder and delete it. And then what you should do is you make a new directory, CD into that, and then
Then wait for them to go through the process again. Yeah.
So in my unit 2, go ahead and start doing MK directory.
Yep.
This is the starting process to install Angular.
Frank, I think,
just
are you
the
installing
template.
Angular or are you making an Angular app? Which one are you?
I'm trying to install Angular.
Yeah, that's.
Oh,
I
I
haven't
think
done
I
it
did.
pretty
Did you
step.
put that in mind, the Angular Hello World?
So
Yeah.
the first thing
Oh, you
is.
Yeah. Yeah, yours should be running.
Thanks.
First thing is, did you go to the
So we
link?
use Gulp
I didn't see it.
This one here.
instead of.
Yeah.
If you want to follow along,
Hit
No.
and then we need.
First and second, yes, the third. Just route.
Give you this first. Then
You're fine. Still at
Oh, whoops.
So you're running.
getting him with Yeoman installed.
I installed Angular, but I don't usually follow along, it's not good for me.
Oh, I never installed that.
Overwrite test comma.
When I'm doing this, does it help to like not have all this shit open?
No,
No.
I mean the more stuff you have open, the slower things go. But it's not.
Yeah, that's not a deal breaker.
There's just a lot to install.
Gulf was no?
Correct.
Gulp was no.
Yeah, no, yes. Let's bring it up again real fast.
So now we can do is we can MKDIR.
So do you have to do this part every time?
For a new project,
It's
yes.
called Angular.
Quickly before MK.
Well, you're already in your unit 2.
Okay.
Now we can go and
So you
Live
have-
share so then?
Oh, sure, on, yeah.
Saying live share could not be launched. If you believe we're six months now, please reinstall live share.
I got 3 people on.
it's no.
No.
I was
No.
on, it kicked me off.
I think you just
Yes.
gotta click on the link again.
And then for these options,
Turn off everything
Oh,
but
same here.
router. With the space bar and arrow.
Got it. Everything but router. Thank you guys.
You got it.
Install Legend.
Anybody else having challenges?
Oh, yeah. You may have already went.
Route and
How do you read?
I got a Route JS and a Angular Route JS.
Box below.
Keep both on? They're the same.
Yep, it loops.
I didn't
Oh,
do
okay.
this, gotcha.
Yep.
You only need to do just that.
Endless.
Just that and stop.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not.
Do I overwrite the Yo or
Yes.
C?
I think we're all gonna
Well,
use
did you
one
already do
version.
that was running now?
I did this, and
Yeah.
then
Right.
it wouldn't let me do that,
Right.
and
Then
then
you're-
I
you're
made a
done.
directory.
I'm gonna relaunch it
Thank you.
and see what happens.
See, you're already over.
We need to do all this.
See, so you did the same thing that we had before, which was we generated the project like right in your home directory.
So instead of.
So what we need to do is.
We wouldn't do
make
yarn
an
start
Angular
to open up.
hello world.
Right.
And go into your Angular hello world. And we need to run this string one time.
Yep. I'll catch up.
Yeah. Yeah, like the way we're gonna start it is probably differently. The way we're gonna run our app is gonna be different.
Put all the things in the unit 2 again instead of Angular tests.
Alright, so I'm done without errors now. Should I be creating a new
It should be.
file?
Nope, no, we're just gonna wait for Mark to tell us what to do next.
Gotcha.
I ended up doing actually setting Angular.
Okay, so it should be in here.
Yes.
You ran it here.
Yes.
Mine did.
I said yes to like overwriting a lot of things.
Huh.
CD.
Is that your file? Whatever you call it, CD.
Uh-oh. So Mark set it up so we can actually mess with it.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Nice.
Do not touch.
Even though I selected read only, it still does that
Yeah.
for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Ah! And now that's in the video. Just randomly delete something, see if I'll see it. Is it going okay or no?
Me?
No, I was looking over it.
Did I possibly not install something?
I think you were in it.
Yeah, see, except you're in your week 7. So,
So this one.
So it's still trying to find-
So we went back on.
Let's get rid of the
No, we just did this process.
well, we're in the wrong directory.
It didn't make, we just made a new directory then.
Yeah, but something's not right. So let me clear out what needs to be cleared out.
So we want to go to
So you're in your week
CG
Yeah.
CD unit 2.
We'll get
We're
there.
gonna make a directory
We'll get there.
called Angular Test.
So you're into AngularJS.
Oh, that's what you already made.
And here we'll do
Angular.
Yo Angular.
So now where are we?
Inside of AngularJS. We're in week 7 AngularJS. And we'll say no, no, yes. And then
Alright, so that works.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's
just
Yo. Angular.
you know, $1,500 would buy a nice laptop.
I know, I just told him. Thinking about Microsoft Surface Pro. If they say that would be okay, if they think that would be.
The Surface Pro.
We're getting all of this still going there.
The Surface Box.
I was actually just looking up the Surface books. They're nice.
Yeah, I like it. Draw on it.
I think we do that in Surface. They're like laptops.
Okay.
Peanut butter.
Thank you.
Jim, like, software is so good. Rather than just
So we're right, we are in the current directory.
We draw on tablets, right?
Yeah.
So it's like better than that. I'm looking.
I get the same thing, like it's telling me that it wants to overwrite these files, but there are no files in the directory.
Yeah, I bet that's what I'm doing.
So where are the files?
Like,
His
I'm
files
not
are
buying
up in
anything,
the
so I
directory.
have money in hand. If I have a
Yeah.
check, I know it'll
You know,
count.
any
Yes. Money in hand.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I painted this thing and it was like,
Why does it keep doing that?
Won't let me buy it. Like, I'm like, she's supposed to be my friend. Like, what? Stop talking to me.
Making your case, not shooting it down.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we just bought all this furniture and stuff that just doesn't match our decor. Like, what?
Get a new couch.
I mean, you have a mansion in Bel Air.
Yeah, it's always
You don't
going
know
back
that
to where they first
Yeah.
ran it.
So I guess she was telling me that the mother-in-law is having to stay there.
Maybe because there's like your rc.json file there.
Something about the color on the wall, the burnt orange.
Makes the
Oh.
Beatles.
Yeah.
Trash.
It's the Beatles. I'm super excited. But I vaguely remember, like, I'm such a perfectionist that it's like, oh, I really need to touch this one area.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take my paint switch. I'm going to a Christmas party, and that's where it's hanging. This restaurant, my friend's restaurant, and we all used to work together, so it's almost perfect. But tonight we're gonna surprise them, and she's gonna surprise him, and it's gonna hang on the wall. And I think I'm gonna go early.
Don't
Give him
touch
more
that.
mustache.
Dude, just a little, just a little. It just needs a little.
Don't do that.
I think it's the hair sticking up a little bit.
Don't-
If they pay $1,500 for it, it's perfect.
It's done.
Yes.
And I don't think they'll ever
Don't
notice
touch
it.
it.
I don't think they'll ever notice it.
No.
Because you can always, that's how I am about my artwork. It's like,
You always critique
Yep.
your own stuff.
You gotta go back to that
always
directory
touch
Yeah,
it.
and delete a whole bunch of dot files.
That's how I look at it too. If someone paid for it, it's out the door.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they can change to it.
So there's no files in this.
Join and then
So Toby, you have files in yours?
Yeah.
I don't have any files in mine.
usually pops up saying.
So it's-
So you're thinking Surface Pro?
I'm thinking, because I'd like something that I could do artworks and,
It's powerful.
you know,
It's
16,
only a 12-inch screen.
16 gigabyte.
Yep.
Is that the new one, the 6, Surface Pro 6?
I'm gonna hate the screen size of it. I have no problem at all. I'm used to like a full, iMac, tons of real estate.
Yeah.
And this is.
That's what big monitors are for.
Yeah.
Plug them in.
You don't have to really get into it. Here's, there's not, you don't need all the depth
Yeah.
and size to it.
I mean, you know, I have extra screens at home, so I usually just plug in and run it.
It's out here.
You've seen the Surface laptop. You see that? Not your finger.
The Surface Pro?
No, the Surface laptop.
I don't know.
It's like a regular laptop. It's got like a screen, so it's gonna, or like a keyboard. And it has like a huge battery in the keyboard, so it's super low battery life. And you can't detach it. from
You
the-
can't?
Yeah.
Because this was working the other day when we were working, right?
Well, that's,
Yeah, and
that's, I think that's what I was looking at.
It's 13-inch screen
It's
with a
the
laptop
same
and
one
keyboard.
that Toby's in now.
The one with
The Surface Pro has like a little like sauce
Just
like
have to
for
put it
the
running.
keyboard.
Let's just see what
It
it
stands
stands
it
for.
up.
Running.
So you're trying to-
Yeah.
Let's try it one more time.
That's the Pro. The laptop is like it's like a regular laptop, but it has a detachable screen.
Okay.
It's 13 inches versus couple extra inches would make
The
huge.
price difference is
Yeah,
more.
maybe we just have that code
Right.
open.
Is it more?
Cool, thank you.
No,
Alright, so we're
She's good. Yeah.
Alright.
I'm completely lost over here with mine. It
So now I
doesn't
can
have
go into
any
this.
files.
Yeah, we had the same problem. We had the same problem elsewhere.
Oh, you deserved it?
I even tried to reinstall.
Yeah,
it,
but it's not that problem. It's another weird problem that I don't understand.
Yeah, you're already in. Next thing we have to do is,
This was. Yes,
you're all caught up. The only thing we have left to do is, the equivalent to and start.
Microsoft Surface Pro.
That's what I
Thank
Okay. Whatever, not spend my new lottery money, like surprise money.
Yeah.
Which?
So I don't have to wait 20 minutes to.
What was?
So there was a
I painted
file,
it.
so this
My business card, if you've seen that.
what would you say Service Pro versus?
this yo configured file, Shay, was still in your root directory.
Okay,
And it was saying, hey, use this as my base pack.
okay.
So no matter where we were running it, it was all, since we were running it in a subdirectory, it was going, wait a minute, I got a config file up here that I need to listen to.
Okay.
So that's why I was putting it all the way, always up in the top.
Was that something that I did on the install or something?
No, whenever you ran the first command, it created
So we
that
don't pay.
for you.
Okay.
And because it's a dot file, it's hidden from like being seen easily. So we had to look to see what was there.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, Gavin figured it out. So
I have art supplies, so I can bring all that. So
it was just, yeah.
Plenty of art supplies, I have a ton of little canvases.
Try one more time when this pops up. I think you'll be okay.
No, lady.
The Angular JS is my hello world.
Yep.
That's the hello world? Okay.
You did it!
Yay! Install and have people set up. That's awesome.
That's a weird thing. I want to look at like why that happens.
Why Bow or why Yo looks at the directory of Puppet for the
Yeah,
config.
it might be just looking at parents.
I think that's what it's doing. It's saying, is there a directory here? Is there, so because I can see that useful if you had a whole bunch of projects. You're like,
I just wanna make
I
sure.
want
that
to
we're-
configure stuff for everything here.
It's-
But the fact that it
Why would
was
you be making this project not where it's supposed to be?
like, I could see this being useful. Everything except for the base pack.
Yes.
you could do that.
Yeah. It's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Okay.
Okay.
Cool story.
Cool story. So here we are.
Hey, we're back. We're back to being able to go.
Yes.
Yay.
So now we can start heading out. So we looked at the package JSON. It's a lot bigger than what we're used to, but that's nothing to be afraid of though. You notice that there's a lot less going on here. So when I look at a new framework, a new app, I want to be able to run it somehow. That's kind of like I want to see what the code is doing, so then I kind of almost reverse engineer what's going on here. So if we look back, it's going to be this new command called grunt serve. So I'm going to bring up a terminal and run grunt serve.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, grunt not found?
No, they're not.
Mine worked. Hello, you?
So CD lecture.
So a code dot before that though?
Yes.
Say it's still
Yeah.
code dot, okay.
So the equivalent to yarn start or npm start here is going to be grunt serve.
Okay.
That's interesting. Must be a pathfinder.
Yeah, that's probably happening. So it's going to run something up. It's going to start on port 9000. We're going to get this nice little default
You
page.
might be having the same issue that we were having, if you're getting that, I think.
Override package JSON, yes or no? It's
That's fine.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't really know the ins and outs of that.
No, that's fine.
Your laptop watching.
And then should just be able to say grunt serve at the end.
do I need to create a file?
Nope.
That's what that's doing for you. Is creating all the files needed.
Okay.
It's kind of like create React apps,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
Where it spits out all the code for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's $500.
Oh, it did. Okay. So where'd it go?
So this is awesome. We see we have a menu. We have Bootstrap installed. I don't know if we've seen Bootstrap
Yeah,
yet.
not seen Bootstrap yet.
Bootstrap CSS framework helps us make it look pretty apps with minimal effort.
You've probably heard Alan in cohort
Yeah.
11
Yeah,
rave about Bootstrap.
yeah, how awesome Bootstrap is. It's not as awesome as he makes it out, but it's still pretty cool.
It's one of those honeymoon things.
Yeah.
where, like, you can make something that looks like this, that's pretty, but then, like, extending it
Yeah.
is often a
But
challenge.
like, do you need your website to look this basic? Like,
Well,
to
it's
be
nice
honest,
that it gives you like decent looking buttons, it gives you
Yeah.
a navigation bar, it
Like,
gives you lists. It
this
has a
is-
lot of components.
this
in
is
it
a
that
great
nice.
prototype.
Mhm.
But like to take it to that next like production ready level, it's kind of like jagged edges everywhere. So yeah, so we have a couple different things.
Surge, grunt serve.
Yes.
Grunt?
Grunt serve. So can everyone run it? Who's following along before we continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So now I want to go in and I want to just change the title. I just want to change something to see what's going on here. So if I come back here to my file structure, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I see something called app. And inside of app, this is almost like our source folder inside of React. This is where all of our files actually live. You notice there's no JSX files. Well, there's only HTML files. And if we open up the scripts folder, we see some JavaScript files, some pure JavaScript files. So I'm going to start looking at app.js. I pick app.js because that sounds kind of like main, kind of like an index or a main. That's kind of like a centering term. I'm trying to use context clues to kind of figure out what's going on here. So open this up. I see that Angular is being used. So how Angular works is that it's an application. Its entire app that sits on top of your website. So this is saying, hey, we're creating a new module. A module is like an application. And it's using some things. And it looks like we have a route provider here. This route provider is similar to a React router. It just says, hey, when we're at this URL, we're going to use this stuff to show a page. So this is our first kind of view into a controller and a view, a template URL. The template URL says, hey, this is the HTML that I'm going to show. That our controller is called main controller. So let's kind of look at that real fast. Views main.html, straight up HTML. Nothing too crazy here. We have our divs, our spans, our p tags, our boilerplate, our hello. We're going to change that to hello world. Just so we see kind of what's going on here. If we come back over here, we're going to refresh the page. There's our change. So now, templating, create a new project. I can now start slinging HTML. That's pretty awesome. How about CSS? Well, styles folder, main.css. Here's something pretty cool. Let's change something in here. I'm going to change my... I'm going to add a color here. What's someone's favorite color? Blue. So now I change that. Should refresh the page, and it should change any H3 to blue, which I don't know if we have any.
You change all the H1s to
Yes, it changed all the H1s to blue.
you may have some styling.
I might have to overwrite some styling there. It's being overwritten by Bootstrap, but there's our style. So now we can start to style our page a little bit. So now let's kind of dive into this whole controller business, controller nonsense. So this controller is where all of our JavaScript logic is going to lay. So when I say JavaScript logic, that means stuff that's not rendering, stuff that's not dynamically displaying stuff on the page. This is purely like our ifs, our whiles, our gets, our fetches, our stuff like that. That's going to live inside of the controller.
So in Angular, unlike in React, we did our JSX and we did our logic and our fetches kind of all in the same file. So there was one file that was like our app file.
Yep.
And our HTML and our JavaScript were kind of blended together. Here in Angular, with this model view controller style, our views are in one file, our HTML is in one file, and our logic, where we do our fetches and our loops, we're going to find them in a separate JavaScript file. So in this mode, it's more separated, whereas in React, it's kind of more componentized together.
Yes, I heard someone the other day in stand-up say how they liked how React kind of everything was right there, like HTML, JavaScript, logic was all together. This is the opposite idea where everything is kind of in its own wheelhouse.
But you'll find that all your views are together on one place. So all your HTML for all your different parts of your app are in one view directory. All your JavaScript is going to be in one directory. So it's organized, it's still just as organized, just in a different way. Right? So here the idea is grouping together things based on what they are. So all your HTML is grouped together in one place, and all of your JavaScript code is grouped together in a different place. And you'll find that see how the main.html also has main.css, also has main.js. Those names are going to track across, right? So your idea is you're like, hey, we're talking about main. In React, you go to main.js and everything would be there. In something like Angular, you say, hey, we're working on the main thing. You know to go to views main.html. You know to go to controller main.js. So there's still an organization, it's just more siloed based on the kind of thing you need to work on, as opposed to everything being in one place.
Both approaches are valid, both have pros and cons. What's awesome about React is that if I'm in the main component, I have everything there that I need. If Gavin and I are both working on the same component though, like we're going to be stepping on each other's toes.
I think the other thing that's nice about this is you can give that views file, that views folder to your design team.
Exactly.
And they can build all that HTML. They don't need to know anything about JSX. They can just build HTML in that views folder, and you can leave them alone over there. Like, hey, design team and UI team, just work in that folder. Do all your stuff, and when we're ready, we'll come along and look at the JavaScript code and make your HTML dance the way we want it to. Right. So same idea. I wouldn't say this is not organized. It's just organized with a different philosophy. And kind of back to where we were, which philosophy is better for your team? Right. So if you have a team where you have designers who are not coders, and all they want to do is sling HTML, this may be better for that team because they just have one place where they do all of HTML. They don't even need to know that they're in an Angular app yet.
Yeah. This is very. That's in fact why I've chosen Angular in the past. Is that I had a designer who knew HTML and CSS, but wanted to learn JavaScript. But he needed to be productive on day one. So it's like, we're going to make me some HTML, and when you're done, stick it inside of this folder, and then we'll together hook it up to the JavaScript. So it was a very good way for us to collaborate around an idea without him learning React on day one. Because that would be kind of crazy. So, how are we feeling so far?
Slightly overwhelmed by a lot of new
it's
stuff.
It's a lot.
Intrigued.
It's very much crash course kind of style, but that's really good. So let's check out this elusive main.js. So inside of here we have that it says, hey, Angular, we're in the Hello World app. So we're in our main application. This thing is called main controller. So whenever the home page loads, let's use this. Now inside of this dot controller takes a function as its second parameter. That function is the code that is run, that is used on the main page. So you see right now, we have on line 12 something called this.awesomeThings equals an array of strings. Have we talked about this at all?
We have.
What is this?
Points to a state, sometimes.
So it points to a state. Does anyone want to build on that definition a little bit?
I have a beach ball, and I'm using a beach ball. It's this beach ball.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it. It's what we were using at the time.
What we're using at the time is probably the best definition so far.
Mhm.
It's always where you are. It's the current context of whatever you are, be it a function, a class, the window, whatever it is. It's the state. It's whatever's going on right now. So here we're saying, hey, this controller has something called awesome things on it. So
I wish I had called this like me or self. I
Mhm.
think those are better words that you could use in your brain to say what this is. Like it's always referring to who am I right now?
Mhm.
What am I right now?
I've seen a lot of developers do that. Be like, const self equals this.
Yeah.
And just call it a day. And be like,
Yeah.
done. So you can rename it. Probably the most infuriating thing is I've seen that equals this.
Who's on first?
Yeah, because they needed this in a different context.
Yeah.
So they stored this into that, and then we had this and that, and
Oh my goodness.
that was a table flipping moment. Anyway, but we have this dot awesome things. So what we're saying is that this controller, this object, now has a property called awesome things, which is an array. So I'm also going to give it another one, this dot title. You can almost think of this as almost like your state. This is where we're going to be storing stuff that goes on the page. This is where eventually we'll also be adding in functions and all the interactivity on the page. But for right now, we're just going to store stuff there. So now if I wanted to use this, I'm going to head on over here to main.html. And I'm going to replace this title with what's coming from the controller. So if I want to access the controller, I'm going to use double squiggles, main dot title. So where did that come from? Double squiggles is equivalent to single squiggles in React. So if you're in the render function, you want to print out whatever is in state, like this dot state dot title. You have to put it in a single squiggles. In React, it's double squiggles. That's it. Now main dot title, that main is coming from right here. We're saying when we're on the home page, use this view, use this controller, but instead of it being called main controller, we're just going to call it main.
So it's like the shortcut referring to the control. It's like the name you're giving the shortcut to get to the controller information.
Exactly.
So that main.title in your template is referring to the this.title you put in main.js.
Correct. So now whenever I head over to my browser, I should see hello from controller. So it was change something in this silo to change something in this silo, and then we can run it. Instead of having that unilateral kind of horizontal change in React that we've seen, it's all in one file. But now it's change stuff here, we're good. Very compartmentalized.
So app.js is kind of like it's just app.js, but like your about and main is like your separate components in a way?
Yep.
Okay.
Except here we call them controllers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to look at it, is that controller is like a component.
Okay.
How are you feeling so far? I know a lot, but it's okay.
But I think for me looking at this, kind of like put myself in their minds, like there's a lot more code around that something else spit out for me, and I'm almost going in and trying to find the place to put the thing to make the thing do something.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in React, we had to build up a lot of this ourselves.
Yep.
Right. So we had to make a constructor and a this.state and make a render function and do all the things.
Yep.
Here it's given us a lot of boilerplate, at least to start with.
Yep.
And now we just need to go in and figure out where to put the things we need so they can appear where we want them to.
And this is a good intro to what scaffolding is, because up until then you've kind of used the generators to start a project, but then as Gavin said, you had to build up everything yourself. And if you look back at your projects, a lot of it you did over and over and over again. Like, oh, now I need a constructor. Oh, I now need to add state. Oh, now I need to add a component did mount. There's a lot of stuff going on there. And that repetition is good to learn. But once you're actually using a project, it's like, wait a minute, if I could scaffold out more of that and make my life as a developer easier, because going in and just changing things is a lot easier than going up and building things out, sometimes.
That's why the little React snippet shortcuts were so great when we added those. Like,
Oh,
we would type RCC and it would
Yep.
spin up the whole class.
Yep.
But we still have to go in and add more.
Exactly. So now we're accessing title. So now I have this array of awesome things that I want to print out to the screen. So this is kind of, so if we had this in React, we'd want to do what? A map, right? So how can we do a similar thing in map? Well, over here, because the logic's now separated, we can't do a map. But what we can do is I'm going to delete a lot of this scaffold. And I'm going to make a h4 tag. Now inside of that, that's where I want to print out the values of the strings inside of that array. So this is our first real Angular concept, and it's called an ng attribute. So since we have our relatively dumb HTML, we want to add some functionality to it. This is where we're going to see stuff that looks like ng4, and then something like this. And it's going to be ng4 thing in main.awesome things. So let's break this down real fast. Our attribute ng4. This says, hey, Angular, this is going to be something special. This isn't HTML anymore. This is where, if I was working with a designer, this is where like they would stop and I as the developer would start. We're going to add some functionality to it. We're going to see that ng dash crop up a lot, short for Angular. We're saying, hey, we're going to do a for loop over here, ng4. A for loop we've all covered before, so we know what it is. We want to do something multiple times. We're saying this is more like a for each loop. Have you discussed a for each loop? So this is more like a for each loop than a traditional for loop. Saying for each thing in main.awesomeThings. We know that main.awesomeThings is an array, right? Come and bring it in from over here. We're saying, hey, we have an array of strings. And for each one, create for me an h4. So when I run this, I should get 3 h4s on my screen with those 3 things. So see if this works. I should, but I didn't.
Put something inside the H4.
Oh, yeah.
Did you say?
The last thing I have to do is actually render out what I want to see.
So Mark, in React, the way we did this is we actually did like JavaScript. We would open up one of the squigglies and we would do plain old JavaScript, like this .state.awesomeThings.map
Yep.
thing arrow, put our JSX template here.
Mm-hmm.
But here in Angular, we can't write JavaScript inside of we can't write like JSX style JavaScript
Correct.
right inside of our HTML.
Yep.
And is that why we have these ng dash attributes?
Yep, because this is just HTML that's getting processed by Angular. React is a library, that library for this framework comes up again, that sits on top of JavaScript. So a lot of what we want to do, like this .state.map, do a little bit of logic inside the rendering, that's all JavaScript. We don't have JavaScript here. We have the stuff that Angular provides for us here. This is one of those, I have my tools, but now all my tools are now Angular tools. So the concepts still apply, the for loops, the ifs, and stuff like that. But now the syntax is a bit different. Instead of doing a map that returns an HTML tag, we're saying, hey, for everything inside of this component, or inside of this array, main.awesomeThings, give me an h4 tag for each one of those.
How is it, where can we find the documentation for this stuff?
It is, that's a great
For
question.
like just
Yeah.
being able to see like, you know, how much, what type of.
Yeah, so it's angularjs.org
Okay.
is the documentation. Pretty verbose documentation. I actually enjoy this. This is one of the few documentations that I actually like. These are all directives. Like here's kind of everything that goes on. This is very much so like here's AngularJS in all its glory.
Where did you get thing? Let me put it in the double.
So thing,
Yes.
what's happening here is that this for loop is creating its own little mini scope.
Okay.
And inside of this mini scope, we're calling something called thing. So that's where this is coming from. So let's create a new array.
It's a Taco Tuesday.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you
Yep.
like there.
So let's create a new array. Let's call it this.students. Inside of this, we have Alan, we got Gabe, we got,
Now you should call them alumni.
oh yeah, I should. Justin, we have Michael, and we have Andrew. Alumni. So now I want to display all the alumni. I'm going to create a new div, give myself a header, alumni. Now inside of this, I want to put all of my alumni inside of a unordered list. So it's going to be an unordered list. Now instead of making an li for each student, I can go, hey, li ng4 equals person in main.alumni. Print out the person. Then here I can even put more stuff in here. I can say, hey, graduated on, what was Friday's date? 11/30.
Can you go back to the other file?
Yeah, sure. For person in person, ng4.
Did you save the controller? Is that saved? That's
Saved it. Yeah, I saved it. Did I spell alumni right?
Your terminal is working for 7. I don't know if that's a file. Nope, okay.
So you don't have to use map anymore or anything.
Nope.
What you replace it with is all of the Angular directives.
Mm-hmm.
So in React, we would write this using plain JavaScript. Now what we do is we use these ng dash directives to tell Angular what kind of looping do we want to do. So here we're saying what we want to have happen is please make one of these LIs, but make multiples of them because we said ng4. So Angular comes along and says, oh, we want to make a bunch of these LIs. Where's the data for these LIs going to come from? That's what's inside of the value part of that attribute. And inside of there, we're using some Angularisms that says for every entry in this.alumni, I want to call it person. Then inside of the LI, we use the double switches again to do interpolation.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was my mistake. I feel bad for this. And it's not ng4. It's actually ng repeat. That's why it wasn't working. Which makes a lot of sense.
So you see here, this is when we talk kind of at the beginning, why do we teach React as opposed to teaching Angular, is Angular is awesome and you can make a lot of super progress, but we're not practicing here, we're not practicing core JavaScript. We're practicing Angular script. It's almost like it's its own language.
Yeah, it's a different flavor and it's drastically different. Even a simple concept like ng4 is just renamed something different like ng repeat. It's no big deal, but it's like, wait a minute, our syntax is off. Just a little bit.
So we kind of understand more of the background by doing
Yes.
Yeah. Our general philosophy is that by learning React first,
Mm-hmm.
before you learn Angular, you really develop your JavaScript muscles.
Yep.
Now you can look at something like Angular, like, okay, cool, I know how that must work because I've done this kind of mapping before. I kind of get what Angular must be doing on my behalf.
Mhm.
Right? Hopefully you can look at that ng repeat and go, oh, they must be doing some kind of map inside, spitting out a whole bunch of LIs for me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go to the other file?
The main JS.
Yes, please.
Mhm.
So person is just Taco Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah, he can go back to he can change that variable name to whatever he likes. He could call it X or tacos or whatever. Right? But then he's got to change the other one. That has to match. That's like our map variable in sys.state.map.
Also reminds me of like the import, where you can call it anything.
Exactly.
But you always have to call it that.
Yeah. So now, Mark, inside of those double braces, can you do functions like to uppercase?
So
Possible?
you can't do straight up functions like to uppercase.
Ah, okay.
There are some things, I forget the technical term, but you can modify the values. Filters. You can create your own filters that do that for you. And I believe there is a built-in one called upper.
Okay.
I might have had that syntax wrong. And it might crash on me.
Looks like it's trying.
Yeah. So it tried and it failed.
So this is a case where, for instance, in React, inside of those braces, we're just in plain JavaScript. So anything that we know from JavaScript is available to us.
Mhm.
Here inside of the double braces, we're in Angular world, and we have to do things the Angular way. Right? So this is that trade-off between all of the power that React gives you to be a good JavaScript developer and use all your JavaScript tools and
Mhm.
tips and things. But here, you kind of have to do it the Angular way, right? And there's trade-offs, right? It's a trade-off where if Angular has a built-in like upper, then it's super simple to write that code where you just say, hey, take my Taco Tuesday and uppercase it.
Mhm.
Where if you don't, this is a simple one because in JavaScript you need a .to uppercase.
Yes.
But Angular is going to provide us some really powerful filters there,
Mhm.
where we have to write more of that code on our own in React.
Yeah,
Right?
because here,
Balance.
this filter says, hey, apply this filter to this object, to whatever value this is. So what we can do that we can write our own custom filters that like capitalize the first letter of the name, format dates in a certain way, convert dates, do a little bit of math on it. That's where like the really fine-tuned rendering control function comes out. So instead of trying to do like a new date time dot to local time string like all in line, we're saying, hey, we have a function that does it someplace else. Just use that function.
This is a different question. That space feature that you have that adds a tiny dot in between every space, does it give you 2 dots when you have 2 spaces? Or is that something?
This?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I actually turned that on recently. Usually don't have that on.
That's called the show white space
Yep.
Show white
configuration.
space.
Yeah, but every dot is a space.
So it just helps you visualize how much space is somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What does the line mean in Angular?
So the line is the start of any sort of filters.
Okay.
It's saying, here's the value, use these filters.
Oh, man. So even methods are different, like
Yeah.
instead of dot to uppercase parentheses, it's just
Yeah, it's
line uppercase.
things are different. It's still doing the same things. And if we crack open the source code for the filter for uppercase, it does exactly that. It does like dot to upper.
So this is the case where like inside of those double braces, we're not in JavaScript land. We can't write regular JavaScript. We're writing
Mhm.
Angular code.
Mhm.
Right? So that's that trade-off. When you adopt a framework, you've got to do it the framework way.
Mhm.
And if there is a filter for what you want, great. If
Yes.
there isn't, now you have to go write a filter, and at that point you're using your JavaScript skills.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in React, if there was a JavaScript function, we could just call it and just do the thing inside of the single braces. Right. So it's just that's kind of the philosophical differences between these different kinds of frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like one isn't inherently better
Right.
than the other. Outside of what we found is when we teach something like Angular first, students become very comfortable with Angularisms, but then you're thrown into a project that lacks Angular, ng repeats, and filters, and you have to code pure JavaScript. You're like, I don't know what to do because what I know is Angularism.
Yep.
So we find is something like React, which is very minimal but relies on building up all of these core JavaScript skills, is great because now if you end up in something like Angular, you'll learn all the Angularisms, and then you need to go write your own filter. You can.
Where can you write your own filter?
So to write your own filter is over here on the controller itself. It is filter, and then you give it a name. So like we can call it whatever we want to call it. New filter.
Like maybe like just take the first letter.
Yeah, capital first letter.
Yeah, first letter.
And then this takes a function, which takes the which actually returns a function. Then this is where we actually put our JavaScript logic to actually do the first letter uppercase.
So that's pretty much JavaScript.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Inside here, you're in JavaScript.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. But over here, to use this, I have to use it inside of my Angular language. So I'm creating this almost new kind of language using JavaScript. So it's another layer, abstract layer on top of it. Which is awesome because now we can start making like our own domain-specific things. So if we had a status on a student from applied, enrolled, to graduated, we can store that inside of our system. And then we can make a custom filter on top of that to change how that status is displayed. Is it a blue button? Is it a green button? Is it an orange button? We can kind of use that to kind of encapsulate our logic inside of something. Like we do in React with components. We'd have like a component-based system that has like, hey, we have a student status component that handles that for us. Here we'd have a student status filter that handles that for us. Same ideas, a little bit different semantics, a little bit different of an implementation. How are you feeling?
A whole new world.
It's a whole new world. Some people either go,
It's just like that.
this is awesome, like I like this like abstraction over JavaScript. Some people go, nah, I need my React. It's 100% preference. Yeah, I learned this first, and then I came to React. When I first hit React, I felt that like, oh, this is terrible kind of feeling. But then once I kind of learned to think like a React developer, it's like, oh, I like this. And I know developers have gone the other way, like learned React and learned Angular. It's like, this is different. This is the bad kind of different.
This is the bad kind of.
I definitely need
Yeah.
a white
I like the way you
space
said that.
Yeah.
marker thing. That helps.
Yeah, that's super nice. So here we are. We'll leave this uppercase. Come back here, get rid of the filter. So this is all fine and dandy, but now let's kind of add some functionality to it, right? Let's kind of make it do something, because it's just still static data, which is awesome, but not what we want to do. Let's add an on-click event that allows me to just click on a student and display its name. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right, so over here on my students, I'm going to want to add something called ngClick. Now this is going to take a function that's going to be called whenever we click it. So I'm going to say main.selected student, and I'm going to pass it the person. We'll rename that from Taco Tuesday back to person. So now whenever I click this LI, it's going to run that function. I haven't made that function yet. But now that I've declared my intentions, let's go make that function. So over here, just how we added data to our controller, we also want to add now functionality to our controller. So we're going to be wanting to use this dot whatever we called the function. Now, this is just creating for us a function at this point. It's nothing magical. There's no React. There's no Angular going on here. This is now just pure JavaScript. So for now, I just want to alert the person. So I want to show it off. Be like, hey, this is who I clicked.
That's like console log.
Yeah. But it's that little alert box. So like, yeah. Boop. It's that thing. So, what?
Oh yeah, true.
Oh yeah.
So like, I now can click Justin and it displays Justin up there. So now it knows which one I'm clicking on. So let's kind of look at that again. Over here, we just have our selected person as a function, and that's it. It takes one parameter, whatever we're passing it, and we're passing that from the HTML over here inside of the template by our ng click. So we're saying, hey, when this li is clicked, run this function, pass it the current person. So no matter which person I'm on, it's always going to pass whichever person that I clicked.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we all go forward together.
OnClick is a JavaScript thing, right? I'm sorry.
So
Or is
onClick is a JSX,
okay.
which is
It ties directly to
yes,
a JavaScript event on click.
yeah. There is a click event that everything fires whenever you click it. It's just how you access it depends on which framework you're in and what language you're in. So in vanilla JavaScript, it's like document.querySelector, whatever it is, .event or .listen.
Yeah, add event listener.
Then it's add event listener, click, and then do this.
Yeah.
React, it's on click. Here it's ng click.
And in plain JavaScript, you can say click equals a function
Mm-hmm.
in plain JavaScript.
Yeah.
Sorry, plain HTML.
Yeah.
Without any frameworky things. There actually is a click attribute on an element.
Yeah.
And that's what all of these things are eventually relating back to. React's on click
Mm-hmm.
is relating back to the click function on an element. ng click is tying into the same thing.
Yep.
Each framework just calls it a different thing.
There's also like ng hover, ng blur, ng whatever event you have. It's ng blah.
If you were to, just in general, I know that there's gonna be exceptions to any rules, but if you were to write a website in Angular versus running in React, which one is gonna be more performant in terms of?
So this is really gets kind of interesting. We're going to see something in a bit called two-way binding. So React is very one-way. So disclaimer, they both can be written in a very performant way. This is actually a big debacle whenever React first came out, because React's claim to fame when it first came out, correct me if I'm wrong, was like, it's so much faster and so much lighter than Angular. But it turned out the test that they were using to write the speed comparisons, they were doing Angular wrong. So like, that's the only issue. It's easier to make performance sites in React, but you can make performance sites in Angular.
What's interesting is the things that made React so fast, which was the shadow DOM.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how we have to give those keys so it knows which things, so it only replaces the parts.
Mm-hmm.
All the other frameworks were like, oh, that's a good idea. We'll steal that idea and put it in
Yeah.
our framework too.
That's where the split from Angular JS and Angular kind of came about. Like, oh, this new idea of a shadow DOM is like, oh, this is pretty cool. We need to have Angular use that. So that's kind of the big difference here.
I would say if you pick up any modern JavaScript framework, it ain't going to be a difference.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there was, everybody would switch to it.
Mm-hmm.
If it was like, Angular is so much faster than React, why are you doing React? Everybody would switch.
Yes.
All of the frameworks themselves are going to be, some things are a little bit faster, some things are a little bit slower in Angular. Some things are a little bit faster in React, some things are a little bit slower in React. they're all gonna sort of even out over the course of
Yep.
whatever it is you're trying to do. Unless you're at the scale of something like Facebook, right?
Mhm.
All those things fall apart when you get to the
Yes.
scales of Twitter, Facebook, where you're talking about billions of requests
Yeah.
per second.
Like,
All of those things kind of fall apart. These things, of course, are on the front end,
mhm.
so they don't necessarily impact the back end. But for all the kinds of apps you are ever likely to make, unless you end up being the architect at Facebook or the architect at
Mhm.
Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
then these things don't matter.
Yeah.
And guess what? When you get to that level, you throw away all the frameworks you know about, and you end up inventing your own, tuned to your particular needs
Mhm.
at those kinds of
Yeah.
scales.
Building a web app for a company here downtown is different than building a web app for Facebook. Just the sheer number of users, and I mean sheer numbers. I mean like a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand, to like billions.
The world.
Yeah, like Facebook, I think has half the world on Facebook now. Like that's half the world. I've seen it on my. So yeah,
So totally not something I have to worry about.
no.
Okay.
And usually stuff like that, like optimization, pre-optimization is like the root of all evil. Like if you're thinking about like, oh, will my app handle 1 million users? But you have 3 users, that's 999,997 users that you have to get in before that becomes a problem. And once you get to that scale, that's a great problem to have.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
because you have 1 million users.
Is that what scalability is? I've been hearing the term like it's scalable. Is that what it means? Like you create an app that only has 3 users, but it can handle many more. Is
Mhm.
that
It's
scalable?
pretty much how much can your app handle. So like if you build an app that's not very performant, that breaks down once we get to a certain threshold, then your app's not very scalable. And there's 2 different terms of scalability. It's throughput, so like how many users can your app handle. There's also how much data can your app handle.
Right.
So like something like Google, which categorizes the entire internet, their search engine is very scalable. But someone who builds a system in a subpar way that can't handle like a deck of cards being stored, and that thing's not scalable in terms of data.
There's also the difference between throughput and speed.
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of it like a pipe, right? The speed is how fast does the water flow through the pipe. The throughput is how much water can we put through the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a very small pipe that sends water through it incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Right, but you can have a big pipe that can only process water slowly.
Mhm.
Right. So sometimes you need a very small pipe that deals with data very quickly. Sometimes you need a very big pipe, but you don't care how fast the data is processed. And sometimes you need both. You need a
Mhm.
really big pipe that can handle a lot of water really quickly. Right. So throughput versus speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, scalability and optimization are really big topics because they're so deep and complex. Juniors and probably your first I'm even gonna say 5 years, you probably don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And a big enough company, you'll hear the term SRE, site reliability engineers.
Mhm.
So Uber, for instance, I just learned this last year. Uber, the company, has 100 people on staff who do nothing but optimize Uber.
Wow.
Their goal is to make the Uber site and API fast.
Mhm.
100 people just in the site reliability engineering department. Right? That's not even developers, right? They don't write code. They just make Uber fast.
Wow.
That's their job.
Mhm.
Reminds me of what you said yesterday about adding people.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like it's crazy. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So yeah, scalability is fun. Where were we? We have selected. So I want to be able to update my title with the student that I selected. So let's kind of rearrange this HTML a little bit. You have selected. Instead of main.title, we'll call it main.selected alumni. We're also going to get rid of this as well. Just kind of cleaning up our scaffold a little bit. So over here, we want to say whenever we click this, hey, this dot selected alumni equals person. And we'll get rid of that alert. This bouncing terminal is so new. I don't know where it came from. Like,
I think at some point like your code had an error, and it's throwing the state in your terminal that says, "Hey, aborted due to warnings." That is firing
that's firing
code that
that.
says, "Hey, terminal, there's a notification here." And even though it clears up later, the bouncing
Yeah.
still stays.
That is.
It's weird.
It's a new feature apparently in Mojave. I've never encountered that before.
See, I don't know.
So,
It could just be that Grunt is firing the event that tells the terminal it's the bell.
okay.
So you can turn that off in terminal, the visual bell. Turn that off.
I will. So yeah, we have students. So now I can go in and select the student
Oh, nice.
of who I'm doing.
So the on click is calling your selected student function in your in your controller.
Yep. So let's put these side by side. Our ng repeat, our ng click, and the actual content.
So that ng click says when that particular li is clicked, call from your main, your controller, call the selected student function and give it the current person that is.
Yep.
And then in selected student, you're just changing this dot selected student equals person.
Yep.
So the equivalent there, line 30, the equivalent in React would be this dot set state selected alumni colon person.
Exactly.
So here we don't have to call a special set state. We can just say,
Mhm.
hey controller, you have a new attribute called selected alumni and its value is person.
Yep. So you notice how this, whenever I first loaded the page, it's nothing. Because whenever it's rendering, it's going, hey main, do you have a selected alumni yet? And it's going, nah, I don't. So it's nothing. So it's not rendering anything. Also not crashing either. It's doing its best to go, it's nothing, that's fine. But as soon as I select something, it's like, ta-da, selected somebody.
Yeah, I've been unable to get any type of error. It just doesn't show it. So it works differently.
So what's interesting is we talked about how Angular has stolen, or frameworks have stolen from React.
Mhm.
React is now kind of stealing back from things like Angular and what, where they're kind of getting rid of the whole this.set state.
Yeah.
So there's a proposal change to React to get rid of this.set state, and it'll let you do things like this.selected alumni equals person, and not have to do the whole set state.
That's kind of
Functions.
cool.
Yeah.
That's actually very powerful.
Yeah, it's called React Hooks.
Mm-hmm.
And we would teach it, but it's still in like the alpha stage. So once that becomes
I think.
the thing,
Yeah.
we will switch to teaching that, because that'll be the new way of doing React.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where is selected alumni coming from? Main selected.
Yep.
So could you in your controller you could do this dot selected alumni equals like a default value?
Yes, I can. So I could do this dot selected alumni equals
Say none.
none.
Dot. Yeah, that's cool.
Dot. That's my good default value. And then you have selected the person.
Takes definitely a lot of boilerplate.
Hmm?
Takes a lot of boilerplate out.
Yeah.
Set the state.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like the whole like set state, kind of like what's going on there. It's kind of abstracted and hidden away from you. That might feel good. That might not feel good.
So it's kind of like state and React, very, very similar.
Mhm.
Do you have like the immutability issue with Angular that you would with React in terms of like being able to be able to say?
Even more so in Angular.
Okay.
So I mentioned it earlier. We're kind of diving into this now. Something called two-way data binding. So React has what's called one-way data binding. Has that phrase ring a bell?
We
So-
talked about how like data flows down, but
Yep.
events flow up.
Yep.
We don't send data back up.
Yep, and that's exactly what one-way data binding is. That we have our data, then we're going to create HTML, and that's it. If we want to change that HTML, we have to trigger those events to fire the rendering again. So we have kind of like this waterfall kind of thing going on here.
It's like when we made our inputs and we made the value equal to a state, and we would type and nothing would happen until we added the on change that would
Mhm.
call a function, that would change the state, which would cause the thing to re-render, and now we could type in an input. That's the idea of one-way data binding. That
Yep.
state drives HTML, but the HTML cannot drive the state.
Yes.
The only thing that can drive the state is by calling a function that takes input from the HTML and changes the state, and then the state flows back out. So it's like circular, right?
Yep.
But the one way is always down, events up, and you make this loop.
Yeah, because you can kind of like work around it with you can theoretically, I mean, it's gonna yield problems, but you can kind of work around it with React. You're not able to do that with Angular probably.
So you probably have to do it a different way.
Yes, so in Angular, this is kind of like the biggest, like, not React kind of moment, is that there's something called two-way data binding. So we know that in React, state makes HTML, and that's it. But now we can actually have stuff inside of our HTML that updates stuff inside of our JavaScript. So if we had an input box that points to a variable, like a value equals this dot state dot whatever, and I change that input, it's actually going to change my stuff in JavaScript now. So it's this two-way communication is there. That raises a whole bunch of problems. There's performance implications. There's this weird, what's the actual current value at any given time? Because even those updates are instantaneous, they still happen at some point. There's a lot of like technical and other reasons why that's not good, but it's actually powerful and easy to work with.
Isn't that a huge security issue too?
No, not as much as any JavaScript is.
So one of the challenges that we had in React was like, if we wanted to click on a student and remove them from the array, in React we can't just like snipe that user out of, or like change their name.
Right.
We couldn't just like go into the array and change it, because when we call setState, we've got to give it the entire array again.
Right.
Do we have those kinds of challenges in
in Angular, we can actually snipe out data.
Oh, nice.
So like, let's create a delete button that removes students from our list.
Oh, cool. Let's see how that works.
So
Because you remember in React, if we had to do that, that's why we had to get the immutability helpers. Because we can't just change, we can't just reach into the heart of React and change a state.
yeah, here we can reach into the heart of Angular and change things. So we're going to create actually a button inside of here. ng, we're going to create a button. Move. ng click. Main.remove student. Remove alumni. Passive person. Bam. So now whenever we click this button, it's going to run this function, which we're going to come over here and make this dot remove alumni person. So now we want to take whichever was selected and remove it from this list. Do we know how to do that in JavaScript? How to remove an item from a list? How would we do that? Maybe a filter? Filter's easy enough. Right, now I can just do this dot alumni equals this dot alumni dot filter. P does not equal person.
So you're using the filter to say, find me all of the elements of the array that are not the person that I'm deleting. So your result of the filter will be everybody but the person, and you're putting that back into the alumni.
Correct.
Cool.
So there's no set state, there's no like immutability helper, there's nothing going on there. Angular's dealing with those challenges for me. Good or bad, I trust the Angular engineers to know what's going on, but I don't know how far I throw that trust.
As far as you can throw them.
Yeah.
Does the, like where you had like kind of this dot alumni equals this dot alumni, so could you just done like this dot alumni filter?
We could do, so like certain,
Or like a new one?
yeah, so certain like array functions do operate inside on the array itself, like splice and slice. We could use those instead.
Yeah, so if you had like the index of that person, you could just slice that element out of the array.
Yep. So now I can go in and remove.
So that's definitely a thing that's easier than
Mm-hmm.
in the current React.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of things that React is trying to solve with this proposal of getting rid of the whole set state idea
Mm-hmm.
and trying something different that's easier.
Yeah. Because like,
It'll be more like doing this.
because like as a developer, like this just feels productive, right? Like we don't have to worry about set state. We don't have to jump through all those hoops. We don't have to worry about immutability. There's so much stuff going on. We can say, hey, update our array to be this new value. Done. So productivity is high, but there could be potential for a lot of side effects.
This seems really simple.
Oh, great.
But I agree.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's
But I've heard that Angular is actually harder. There's more of a learning curve. So
yeah, it's a very steep learning curve. So we're hit the tip of the iceberg today.
Yeah.
Like that's all we've done. One page, we've added one list.
Yeah.
You know, we have one button.
Yeah. And we've shown you the happy path.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Right, this is like the hello world happy path. Like, look how awesome this is. And then like we haven't shown you behind the curtain of like
Yeah.
this is where the buzzsaw is gonna come in.
The
Right.
often
You're still in this
Yeah.
like first day honeymoon.
Yeah. Because
of,
like there's directives that we can do. Directives are custom tags. We can actually make custom elements inside of it, which look like components. So components do exist, but they're called directives. You can have multiple controllers on a single page. You can do a whole bunch of crazy stuff like that. And because you can means people do, even though they shouldn't. So yeah, there's a lot of buzzsaws that we're just kind of going, not today.
Yeah.
And also it feels good because you know a lot of the stuff already.
Mhm.
Like, hey, this just JavaScript. Like this could just be any sort of function object that you could encounter anywhere. This is just HTML. There's only a little bit of extra stuff drizzled on there. So that feels good because you know stuff.
Yeah, that comfort level you feel like, oh, this is easy, is because you've built up some muscles coming from React.
Mm-hmm.
So this is that feeling of when you go to learn your second framework or your second language. Some of it's going to feel really familiar and easier, even if you don't really feel like a JavaScript or React expert yet. You do have some base level skill that you're seeing repeated here in a new context and going, there's some familiarity here, and I like some of this because it's similar but different. And you're appreciating those differences because you have some context coming from React.
Yeah, you notice how we're always kind of relating it back to React. We're using our existing knowledge to leverage to learn a new framework. So you can kind of use that going forward.
If we had thrown this to you on day one of not seeing React, you'd be like, what is going on with all these files? Why is stuff everywhere? Kind of that same feeling you had on like day 2 of React.
Yeah. So we've removed stuff from us. What if I want to add stuff to a list? Yeah, we're gonna kind of see that two-way data binding start to happen. So if we want to add something to a list, we'll go back over to my HTML. We're going to need an input box, right? Type text. We'll give it a placeholder. Add an alumni. Nothing too crazy here. You know, and we'll even give it a button as well. btn. And whenever we on-click, ng-click equals main.addStudent. I need to get that right. This dot add alumni equals a function that does something. So this is where we're going to introduce another concept called an ng model. Now an ng model is going to say, hey, this input tag is tied to this JavaScript variable. Every time this JavaScript variable updates, change the value of this input tag. Every time this input tag updates, change the value of that JavaScript variable. So that's where that kind of two-way street starts to happen.
So it's interesting, and that's built into Angular. In React, there are third-party plugins, libraries we can add that give us two-way binding in React. But React itself doesn't do it. You got to go find a third-party library that gives you that.
So we're saying, hey, ngModel equals main.newStudent. So over here, let's create a variable called this.newStudent equals just the empty string for right now. So now, unexpected token question mark. Controller with the name main controller is not recognized. What?
You have one small typo where you called them Illumin and alumni. You did the last one.
No. I am a terrible speller. You'll find out if you ever lecture with me. This is not my strong point.
C# hasn't corrected you of that yet?
No, I have tools that fix my spelling for me, so I don't care. It's ironic because my dad is an English professor, so I should have good grammar and stuff, but I don't. So now I have this model here, and I have this button, which is awesome. Do I still have the tools installed? I do not. So now I want to, whenever I click this button, I want to print out the current value, whatever the new student is. So down here in this, my this.addAlumni, I'm just going to console.log this.newStudent. And that's it. So this will work because this new student ties to our model main.newStudent. So come over here. Hey, it's empty. But if I type in a new alumni, I get Matt.
Cool.
So we're going to do two things here. First off, we're going to add in another section here. You are adding main.newStudent. So now as I type, this label is going to update. So I can type in Matt. I can type in, if we notice, right here, as I type and change that value, it's updating the JavaScript variable, which is also updating my HTML. So there's a whole bunch of back and forth that's going on. If you wanted to do this in React, you have to re-render and trigger all the render stuff again.
That's what the onChange this dot set state cycle does. But we don't have here because Angular allows you to bind that input to a variable.
Yep.
Right. It's skipping the onChange this dot set state. Difference in opinions about what the framework or library should and should not provide you.
Yeah, like it feels good sometimes, but sometimes like I don't like that. But like that's kind of the opinion.
So what if you wanted to have the variable be the uppercase version of what you typed in there? Now, so what if you wanted the variable as you typed in the new student?
Okay.
So for instance, in React, what we did was in our set state, we took whatever we were typing in and we forced it to uppercase as that event was firing.
So as that event was firing, that's going to be a new event because the onChange event, which as we're typing, come up here to our input. And let's add an event here, ng change equals main dot uppercase alumni.
Right.
And then over here, this dot equals this dot new student equals this dot new student dot to uppercase.
Uppercase. So now as you type in that,
Refresh. So Y. Save that. Make sure you save your files.
so whatever you type in lowercase shows up. in uppercase. Right? So in order to do that kind of thing, you're back at the point of essentially doing on change effectively a set state. Right? So the idea here is that Angular thinks that two-way data binding is important enough to add it as part of the default. React says, I'm not going to make any assumptions about how your data binding works. If you want two-way data binding, go add a two-way data binding React plugin, and then you get two-way data binding. Right? So it's based on how much is that framework or library going to give you out of the door,
Yep.
and how much do you have to bring along with you later.
So the last kind of piece to this puzzle is every time I click that add button, I want to add to my list of students. So down here, I want to add it to my array. So this.alumni.push. This.new student. And then of course this.new student equals empty string just to reset it. So I come over here. Wanted to add Matt. I can now add in Karsten and Ben. So yeah, a little bit less line, but it's doing a lot more for you. Thoughts? No thoughts are good?
It's definitely not less tight. If you learn the ins and outs of like what do you call it? Angularism.
Yeah.
It's
Angular
pretty
syntax.
cool. It's different.
You have to
Yeah.
use both syntax at the same time.
Yeah.
JavaScript and Angular.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you got to look in multiple places to find things. But once you learn that way, right, that productivity comes along.
Yeah.
Just like once you embrace and learn the React stuff, that productivity comes along. Right? It's a good comparison and contrast between a very opinionated framework that by taking on a larger framework, you get a lot of things for free. But you see that in some cases it kind of handcuffs you to a way of doing things. Like I want to show the uppercase version of the person.
Yep.
I have to do it the Angular way. I don't have the freedom here to do what I want as a developer to just say person.to uppercase. That same handcuffing is going to appear in other places of Angular as you expand your Angular capabilities. As long as you're okay with that, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Right? The productivity comes with it, but you've got to learn the Angularism of it. What happens to teams sometimes is what Mark was saying earlier is they want to go away from that, right?
Yep.
And then complexity happens and weird errors happen and you have to like crack open the heart of Angular. Once you do that, then you run the risk of difficulties. Right? But if you stay within the lines,
It's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
So you can essentially, if you wanted to possibly run into a buzzsaw, you can possibly change like the way that Angular works in your app, but we're obviously don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just with any sort of JavaScript framework, you can go in and see what's change what's going on in there. But nah, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So like this like
But if it just doesn't work,
Yeah.
the Angular,
like Angular gives you two-way data finding by default. There's a syntax that you can change up how you do Angular that now gives you one-way data finding. But you have to like jump through a bunch of loops, you have to configure it, and then you have to use that syntax everywhere. And that's like a hidden feature of Angular. But then you lose the power of Angular because now you can't access that variable anymore. So that value is now gone.
Yep.
You have to do some loops to get it back. So this is where you're kind of fighting against the opinions of Angular.
And that's going to be with everything as a developer.
Yeah.
Every library you add to your toolbox, right? We just did React Router, right?
Mhm.
And we saw that React Router made us componentize our app more, right? We used to just write a whole bunch of stuff in app.js, and React Router's like, nope, we really can't do that anymore. Everything's got to be components, right? So you gain routing, but now you're forced to be more component driven. If we started adding more libraries in React, like two-way data binding forms, we have to do it the way that that library wants us to do it. We don't have all the power and the freedom, right? So sometimes that trade-off is good because we get productivity. Sometimes that trade-off is bad because we have to do it the way that library person wanted us to do it, right? We are not in control of our own destiny in terms of how two-way data binding works in Angular. If that works for our app, awesome. If all of a sudden it doesn't work for your app, hopefully Angular gives you a way to work around that challenge. But if you run into something where Angular doesn't work for you, and the workaround for it is complex, you still have to do it because, right, you're in Angular's world. Where if you make a different choice, right, you don't have that. But the trade-off is you have to do more of the work. That comes down to the type of team you're on and what they feel is the right choices.
Yep.
So you may find you end up on a team that is, hey, we're a React team, and we're a React team with React Router, Redux, and a whole bunch of other libraries, because this is what we think our suite of productivity tools is that gives us the flexibility of React plus all the benefits of this. And you may find you're on a team that is, hey, we're Angular, but we also add in these things because they help us overcome some of the challenges we've had with Angular.
You'll notice that there's no like ES6 classes here. Like it's all like kind of like function based. It's kind of like almost like we're stuck in 2015. Well, this is one way of doing Angular. I've seen shops that now like, oh, we're going to use ES6 class syntax to represent our controllers. So they've taken the better parts of the newer JavaScript, running it through some senior dev fancy configuration files to produce Angular files. So that's where like, oh, the tool chain is supplementing the framework itself.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right? None of these is right and none of these is wrong. Right? This is also why we see every year new frameworks being invented. Right? Because what a particular team's challenges are may not fit the React style or the Angular style or the Ember style. And that team is large enough and good enough for them to essentially turn their own internal code into a framework. We had all these challenges. We needed to solve this. We solved it a particular way. We think this is a general thing. We're going to take the general part of our code and slice it off as a new framework. Which is where all of typically the best frameworks come, is they come out of work that a team did where they built their own tools and decided to carve off the general part and share it with the world. And this was the result of solving particular types of problems in a particular way. I can guarantee you that 5 years from now, if we have the same conversation, it may not be React and Angular. It will be some new framework that none of us has even heard because someone out there is writing it today. And that's exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, the half-life of a React framework, I think, is like a year and a half, or a JavaScript framework is like a year and a half, 2 years. So like that's something. I mean, I say stuck in time back in 2015, like it's so long ago. That was barely 3 years ago.
And I think this is why we talk about what we have React and Angular is they're two of the frameworks that have lived a good life so far.
Yeah, they've kind of withstood the test of time. They're widely adopted. They have good, strong, basic foundation principles. They're just popular and they're good. They're good to play in.
And they represent two of the extremes of the types of things you're going to fall into, right? React being a very small, unopinionated, kind of roll your own, bring other tools along approach, and Angular is everything, the kitchen sink, and a few other things in other rooms in the house.
What are the thoughts? I mean, this is pretty much a basic React app. We have our create, read, update, deletes. This is pretty much one list except with alumni instead of things to do. We did a little bit of dynamicness, two-way binding, saw the basic structure of an Angular app.
You mentioned that Angular kind of has its own Axios and Fetch.
Yeah.
Is that something we could see real quick?
Yeah. So it's relatively simple to bring it in. So Angular has a lot of built-in stuff with it. When I say we get the whole kitchen thing, that's completely true. What it does very well is something called dependency injection. This is one of those like $5 words and phrases that like everyone says, but no one knows what it actually means because it sounds really complicated. But what it boils down to, dependency injection, is just passing things in. It's taking whatever we're using on the inside, instead of keeping it on the inside, we're just passing it in instead as a parameter inside of a function. So what we can do is up here inside of this function, we pass it in something called $HTTP. Who's done jQuery before? A few of you have done jQuery. You've seen that $sign syntax. I believe that came up in lecture a couple days ago.
Immutability helper uses $push.
Yeah, that $sign is now like it's not Angular. Sorry, it's not jQuery. It's now Angular. Angular uses that same kind of nomenclature.
Yeah,
The
it's just that JavaScript allows you to start a variable with a $sign.
Yep.
And we usually use that $sign for, this is kind of a special thing. Like, hey, pay attention to this. This is another kind of thing. It's not like a regular variable. We're putting the $sign here to mean pay attention.
Like usually that $sign variable means that that variable came from a framework, or not a developer on your team, unless you're building a framework. So now, we just say, hey, give me your HTTP function. Now Angular is doing a whole bunch of stuff on behind the scenes to get that to work. But that's all you have to do is now start using this. So now what this does, this mirrors more like an Axios type development rather than a fetch. So if I wanted to
bring in the API of the people in space right now.
Space.
That gives you a list of names.
People in space API. Do you know the URL by that?
No, it's a little bit of a weird one, but this Google search will find it, and it is people very first one. Open notify people in space right now.
Okay. No.
Yeah, and it brings back something that looks like that.
Okay. Cool. So now, whenever this controller is first loaded, I want to run .get that URL, and then that get looks a lot like Axios, right? But instead of Axios, it's HTTP. Saying, hey, get this, then response, do this stuff. So I'm going to console.log response real fast to see what it is. Just make sure everything's wired up properly. So, hey, we got it. We got the data here.
That looks a lot like our Axios response too.
I believe this, I don't want to speak for people, but this is kind of like a precursor to Axios. Because before circa 2014, doing an Ajax call was, to say the least. But then this happened, and then fetch happened, and then Axios happened. That's kind of like the order. And you can kind of see like everything looks and feels kind of similar. We have some sort of method that takes a URL, and then we get back a promise of data. So I want to throw this on the page. So this dot people.
Why don't you just add them to the end of the alumni?
Okay, it would be this dot alumni dot concat. Nope, not concat. It's
I always look up the documentation for it.
adding array to array JavaScript.
Could you use a spread operator?
Yeah, it is concat.
This concat.
Concat will concatenate one array onto another.
Push takes multiple arrays.
Yeah, I think concat will put the new array on the end of the existing array.
Concat will not change it in place though.
Will it give you a new one?
I believe yes.
So you can just do this alumni equals
This dot alumni dot concat resp dot data dot people. That is it.
except I think that the response has you still have to pluck out the name.
Oh yeah.
You have to map.
M dot. totally guessing that it's the name.
It is. It gives you back an array of objects and it has
Oh,
the
okay.
name.
Computer's going slower as the lecture goes on. It's probably my OBS.
Hey,
Yeah, here we go.
Sergey Alexander Serena. Right. So this idea of dependency injection is kind of what the word says. We need an HTTP library. It's going to give us an HTTP library. It's going to inject as an argument an HTTP library. We don't know which one it is, but it's a dependency now of our code that is being given to us. We could now go into Angular and say, my dependency is now different. I don't want to use the one that Angular gave me. I have a very specific HTTP library I want to use.
Yep.
I will make that my dependency, and Angular will provide it to me, will inject it into my code. So we can now swap out which HTTP library we use by telling Angular $HTTP needs to be a different library.
And the advantage of that is twofold. One, now my main controller doesn't care how we make the AJAX calls. Are we using the built-in stuff? Are we using the Axios? Are we doing something else? It doesn't care as long as that dependency gets injected. So it's kind of dumb to that fact. That allows us to keep our logic separate and not kind of muddy the water that's going on there. The other advantage to this is testing. I know we haven't talked about testing much, but now we can actually test this code without having a server running somewhere or the API up. I can now run this code, give it a mock, new word
Fake.
mock, a fake dependency, a fake HTTP client, and it will still work and we can still validate that stuff is going.
So it'd be an HTTP client that doesn't actually go out and do a request, but pretends like it did,
Yes.
and would give you the same data. Kind of like how when we were doing React apps, we would go to the API and copy and paste it and put in a JSON file.
Yep.
We could make an HTTP for Angular that said, no, don't actually go on the internet. Just read this JSON file and give me
Yeah.
back the data as if I had. It would be very similar.
So it helps making testing a little bit easier. We haven't talked about testing because that's kind of like a second step kind of thing. But that's kind of why we do that. I saw some eyebrows raised, like why would we inject dependencies? But yeah, it's decoupling of logic and better testing.
And it's another example where in React you could do that, but you would have to bring your own dependency injection library.
Yeah.
Where Angular gives you one.
Yep.
Hopefully that's the one that you like. 80% chance it is.
Yeah, like I've never had to change that at all. It's like it works. It works fine. It's fast enough. It's probably doing the same thing that Axios is doing under the hood.
Could in fact be Axios.
It probably might be. So yeah, like that's kind of an easier way to do things, a different way to do things.
So hopefully you see some things that are familiar to you, some things that are familiar but different, like the ng repeat instead of map, and some ideas that are brand new. This idea of controllers and models and keeping things in separate parts, right? Our views are in one place and our controller, our logic is in another, right? But some of the pieces should at least be, we should see hints of things you've done before, but in a new way. And we're not expecting you to like understand or be able to replicate this, but we want you to see that another framework has echoes of the things you've done so far. And the feeling that if I were to dive into this, I'm not seeing some things for the very, very, very first time, but I'm seeing it for the second time.
Yep.
And by the time you've now taken time after cohort to learn, say, Angular or Ember, right, you have a little bit of comfort in React and a little bit of comfort in Ember. Your third framework, you're going to learn like, this is, quote, easy now.
Yep.
And it could be even a different style than React or Angular. Right? It probably takes to your third or fourth framework or your third or fourth language till you get that comfort level. Right? Next week when we start your second language, right? Keep HTML, CSS off as a list of languages, right? Your second programming statement interpreted language, right? You've got JavaScript. Some of you are going to dive C#, some of you are going to dive Ruby, right? You're going to have that like at the bottom of the barrel feeling again.
Oh yeah.
Right? And we're going to build back up. By the time you then add after cohort, you go learn Go or Rust or whatever it is.
Yep.
That one will take less from the bottom of the barrel. by the time you get to your fourth language, you'll be like, I'll go read the documentation and make a couple Hello World apps,
Mhm.
and I'll be kind of on my way.
Because that bottom of the barrel is actually not as far down as it was the first time.
Mhm.
Because like now, you now know what if statements are. You now know like the kind of the core logic. Now it's just, what's this syntax? I kind of get a while loop. I kind of got it here. Oh, now I got a while loop a bit more here now that I tried it again. So there's a bit more. Your bottom isn't as low as it was the first time.
It may not be as high as you want it to be,
True.
but it's not as low as it would have been
Mm-hmm.
without that experience.
How else we feel? Yeah.
Well, I'm feeling good, but
Oh, good. Me too.
I'm curious about like a cat thing. Well, y'all talked about concat, something I've never used it. I just from the base that I understood was it just tacked it on two arrays to
Yep.
put them together.
Yep.
Okay. Was there like any? You said there was like some sort of issue or something. I'm just curious what that
So-
was.
Well, he was going to initially just concatenate response data people.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
when we looked at the data, it wasn't an array of strings. It was an array of objects.
Yeah.
So that's why he added on
Okay.
people is an array of objects. So I'm going to map each element from people into that person's name.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me an array of strings, which I'm going to concatenate onto alumni and replace my alumni array.
Yes.
Okay. I get it now. Thank you.
I just kind of want to validate because I believe concat doesn't change it in place, but it might. So some JavaScript array functions change the array in place. That's immutability stuff. Where it's like we don't want to change our array.
Yeah, some do and some don't.
Yeah, and I thought this one doesn't.
I think you're right.
So I'm going to get rid of the assignment. So now what I expect to happen, because it's always good to go in with proper expectations, I don't think it changes the array in place. I think it returns a new array. So I expect this not to work.
Yeah, so it's going to do all the work of it's going to take the people and turn the objects into strings
Yes.
and build up an array.
Yep.
Concatenate that onto alumni
Mhm.
and then throw the results away.
Yep. I'm
You
going
didn't
to
save it in a
I'm
variable.
going to do the work, and then I'm going to not set it on the table and toss it on the floor. So I
So-
expect it to break.
This what I really like about this is the kind of thing that as you're working with a new function or a new thing that
Mhm.
you should get in the habit of starting to do. This
Yes.
is a good habit to continue to build skills, which is let me try something, but before I run it, I'm going to set the expectation in my mind as to what should happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then if it does what you expect to happen, like confirm it happened because my assumption about X was
Yep.
right. And if it doesn't, that's an opportunity to be like, I should go read the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go read the documentation for concat and see how it really
Mhm.
works. Reset my expectation and try it.
It's very much like based off the scientific method. If you recall that from high school and like your younger years, like, hey, make a hypothesis. How do I test that hypothesis? Now, how can I prove it? Did I prove it or not prove it? It's very methodical of how it does. So now, let's see if this breaks. It does not work. Let me validate it by refreshing the page and actually
Just
seeing
to be
it.
absolutely true. You didn't get you typed an R.
Ah,
Wouldn't it
there we go.
create a circular thing if it did work that way?
No, if it did work that way, it should just attach it on, but it doesn't. So it is returning a new array. So it's good to know. That's good because I've been using that in React to get around that
Yes,
immutability.
immutability.
policy. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, this would be this dot set state
Yeah.
alumni colon this dot state dot alumni concat.
So that's Angular. It's 1202. Awesome. For our review at 2,
Or with
or
me at 3.
with me at 3 final
Whichever.
capstone projects?
Yeah.
Capstone pitches.
Yeah. So if you have an idea already for your capstone project,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about them at 3.
Yes.
If you don't have one yet, that's okay.
Yes.
But you should start to think about, based on what you've seen, what we talked about earlier this week about
Mhm.
find something that's a personal hobby, a personal challenge, a thing that you wish existed in the world,
Yep.
Something you're passionate about.
Yeah, it's just
Use that to build your app.
yeah, it's just capstones are coming. Let's start thinking about like what ideas we will build. If you have an idea like around a hobby or something like that, that's awesome. Reminder: it doesn't have to be a novel idea. Like
Doesn't have to be a business.
if you go like, I want to recreate Reddit, like, oh, okay, what parts of Reddit do you want to recreate? You know, it's like that's perfectly fine. Or it could be like, oh, I have a problem that I want to solve with my finances. Like, that's fine too. But it doesn't have to be original. Also, if you don't have an idea and you don't want to come up with one, we're going to be pitching ideas to each other as a group. You can be like, I want to work with someone on my final project. We do encourage group work for capstones.
Yeah.
So it's also an alley to go down.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you get to do half the amount of work though.
Oh no, you probably do like over twice the amount.
Yeah. So
But it's great practice.
doing a team project, as you've already experienced doing at least one group project, it's more like 120% of the work of doing it alone.
Yep.
But the nice part is you can kind of mix and match the things that you want to work on, do more of that and less of the things you don't want to work on.
Yep.
But adding a second person to a team complicates communication.
Yeah, that's the conversation we're having the other day with a few people, like the Mythical Man Month.
Yeah.
You know.
But you both have to be in either Ruby or .NET.
If anyone has a group project that they want to pair up, we will get that bridge whenever
Yeah,
we get there.
I'm with you.
Probably. But if like you want to brand yourself as a front end developer and not do any back end, then like,
We
okay,
would figure out how to make that work.
yeah,
As an example of like, what kind of ideas should I be doing? I just learned, I did not know this, that Kenny, you do painting, right? So maybe take something from your painting experience. Maybe you're gonna make a front end store for selling your paintings. That would be an awesome awesome final project, right? So you can create new, like as you make a new artwork, there's an interface for you to add the painting and upload an image and set the price, and people can come along and check the ones they want and buy them. You don't have to link it to an actual purchasing
I
thing.
probably shouldn't, but
It's kind of like what John, you were saying about doing something similar for your photography. Those kinds of things are awesome.
Yeah.
Think about your hobbies and your interests or your passions, and figure out what is an app I can do that relates to that. Use what you saw from Cohort 11's demo day as a guide for the shape and size and scope of things that we're expecting. Right? Doesn't have to be huge.
yeah.
If you find something that you're personally interested in, that helps make your capstones
Yes.
smoother.
And that's at 3:00 today.
Yeah, we'll do it at 3.
Okay, 3:00 here. Here, there, here.
Yeah, we'll do it here.
Here. Okay. Do they have homework tonight?
Are we gonna have them do something with Angular?
I don't think so. I think it's just nice to work on your capstone idea, and
Yeah.
then continue to clean up your Git repositories.
Yeah. So.
Do you want to test code or is that?
So maybe we'll do this. Well, I'll give you your weekend assignment now. So your weekend assignment is going to be to go back through your GitHub repositories from Unit 1 and Unit 2 and make sure they're nice and neat. Go back and finish any homework you're doing. If there was an adventure mode you wished you had done, go and complete it. But the primary thing I would like you all to do this weekend is start to go back to the README for your projects and update them to have a nice README that explains what this assignment was, what did you learn during this assignment, maybe put in a screenshot of the app, maybe an animated GIF of you using the app, right? So it's Minesweeper, it'd be nice to see somebody clicking around.
Pretty
in there.
much, it's the elevator pitch for that project.
Yeah.
So like, what I do, what concepts did we learn, even like a high level, like this is Minesweeper. I used a Minesweeper API and using passing around state and components.
And they used React.
Yeah,
Right.
React.
The idea is that eventually your GitHub is going to be part of your portfolio, it's going to be part of the links you're going to share with people. People are going to come and click around through your GitHub looking at your code. When they land on your Minesweeper homepage, it'd be nice if it wasn't the Create React app boilerplate. It was something that you've written about. This is my Minesweeper.
Yep.
This is what it would look like if you clicked on it.
Here's
and making
the
sure
URL
that
for it.
the URL should be in the title bar.
Should be.
If it isn't, if you don't have a deployed version of all your apps, make sure you do. Make sure they work, right? Now's a good time to clean all those up before we start Unit 3.
Yep.
And make sure everything is kind of tidy. So I will write that up. I have an old copy of that assignment. And some links to how do I make an animated GIF, what are tools I can use, so I can kind of record myself using the app.
And if you feel like making something in Angular, go for it.
Yeah.
But focus on cleaning and tidying up yourself from unit 2 and 1.
Yeah. I'll put that in your homework. It'll be your homework for tonight and through the weekend.
You'll probably get some other stuff too, but for right now, that's it.
Super.
What do you see y'all in 3?
It just takes forever to do it. You know what I mean? It's like it drains
I
like
like that.
this